Welcome everyone to the CBS Chicago Culinary Kitchen. I'm Mary Dixon from 93 XRT. And with us today at the Culinary Kitchen, Gail Simmons.
Hi. Hey guys.
Gail Simmons, an original permanent Top Chef judge, Top Chef Masters, Top Chef Just Desserts, and of course, you know, a Food and Wine magazine, one of the organizers of the premier culinary events around the country. And now, Gail is touring around the country and telling us all about your first cookbook.
That's right.
With your name on the cover.
Yeah, that is true.
Bringing it home, favorite recipes from a life of adventurous eating, and it's out this week. So congratulations, Gail. Welcome to Chicago.
Thank you so much for being here. I love Chicago. I'm always thrilled to be back.
And you've got a beautiful dish ready for us.
Yes, and before we talk any further, I'm going to do two things with this dish quickly so that we can make sure that things move along, because some things take a little time.
You go for it.
I'm making for you this morning Romesco-Style Gazpacho. So a cold gazpacho, I'm sure you guys have had versions of it before. It's a chilled cold soup that's traditionally from southern Spain. I spent a year of my college days in Spain, in the south of Spain, in Sevilla, where I learned to make gazpacho. And I actually think most people in the States don't make it properly. They make delicious other things, but it's not gazpacho. So when I was writing my book, I really wanted to capture the flavors of Spain that I love so much. And I want to show you a version of gazpacho that is very authentic, but also adds a little bit of a twist in that it blends gazpacho, traditional flavors of gazpacho, tomato and bread and sherry vinegar, which are really what are in gazpacho, almost full stop, with another Spanish inspiration of mine, a sauce that I love so much called Romesco, which is a traditional Spanish sauce that's often used to dip these big, beautiful onions that they grow every year there, that you sort of dip into the sauce. And they dip it with bread, and they use it for all kinds of things. You can make it with fish and with meat as well. Romesco is usually roasted peppers and almonds. So this is sort of a mashup of the two, but it really gives you the flavors of Spain. So before we start chatting, I'm just gonna do two quick things. First, I have a third of a cup of almonds, and I've chopped them up, and I'm just gonna put them in the oven for 10 minutes to really lightly toast them. And then I have cubed day-old bread. The other thing that's great about this dish is that it gets rid of all your bread, so there's no waste. And this is a very traditional thing to do. So this is bread that's been sitting out, it's a little dry, you don't know what to do with it, make gazpacho. I've just made it into cubes, and I'm pouring water over it.
How much water do we have there?
Just to cover it.
Okay.
Right there. And you're gonna see it's gonna sit for 10 minutes while the almonds are toasting. And what will happen is it will absorb a lot of this water and soften, and that's gonna be the base of the gazpacho. Okay, so now I'm gonna put 10 minutes on the clock so that we don't forget about those almonds, and meanwhile, we can chat.
You know, I know home chefs used to use the twisty-turny timers, but what did we do before our smartphones?
It's amazing.
So you're taking us to Spain with this dish. Where else do we go with this cookbook? What's the inspiration?
A lot of places. I feel very lucky that over the last 20 years of my life, I've worked in the food industry. But even before that, my whole life, I have traveled. My father is from South Africa. My mother is from Montreal. And I was raised in Toronto. And because we never had family in the city we lived, we were always traveling to visit them. So that meant a lot of time spent in Montreal, sure, which is just about a 5-hour drive, but also a lot of time spent in Southern Africa. And my parents were great adventurers, so we didn't spend money on things like fancy cars or fancy clothes, which, you know, when you're a teenager, that's what
a big bummer.
Wish your parents would spend their money on. But instead, we traveled. We went to Costa Rica, we went to the Middle East, we went to Europe, we went to Africa. And they loved to take us on tours of the world, and we always got to know the countries that we went to through its food, through its markets and its grocery stores, and of course through its restaurants. And my parents were always great eaters and great explorers, so they set really high, strong examples for me. And somehow I managed to parlay that example into a job. And so
I was going to ask, what did they do that you were traveling around so
you know,
much?
my father was an engineer, a chemical engineer. You know, South Africa was the other side of the world, so that was in the days before there were direct flights from America to South Africa, and certainly not from Canada. So in order to get to South Africa, we always had to stop. So you either have to stop in London, or you have to stop off the coast of Northern Africa. So there wasn't an easy way to get there. So that was a reason we had to travel to see his parents and his brothers and all my cousins. And my mother was a cooking teacher. So that was something. And she actually wrote about food for the Globe and Mail, which is Canada's biggest newspaper.
Right.
So in a way, destiny was beyond my control. But I didn't answer your question of where else we went. So the book obviously takes inspiration from South Africa. The meals I remember there. Certainly there's a lot of Canadian influence. But over the last 20 years in the job I've been in, I've been able to do some extraordinary travel with Top Chef, with Food and Wine Magazine, with the chefs I've worked with. So there is a lot of inspiration from a month of my honeymoon spent in Vietnam and Japan. There's a few recipes from time spent in Indonesia, in Singapore with Top Chef when we went there on our 7th season finale. And then because I'm Canadian, I mean, there's other places too. I spent a summer in the Middle East. I spent a summer in New Zealand and Australia bartending when I was 19. I don't know how I convinced my mother to let me do that one. Amazing. So all of those things are in the book for sure.
And now you have a daughter as well.
Yes.
And are you taking her around the world and introducing her to all of these? How's that going? How old is she?
Poor child. She's almost 4.
Wow.
And she gets no choice because I travel for my job quite a bit. And until she's able to say no, well, she actually says no a lot. But until, you know, she has to be at school and can't go on these trips. She travels with me almost everywhere. She's not here. My rule is that if I go away for less than 4 days, she generally doesn't come with me. But if I go away any longer than 4 days, then she comes with me. And so we shoot Top Chef. The other thing that's interesting is because I'm Canadian, I actually hadn't been to a lot of the States until I was 21. We traveled to Africa, but I had never been to Chicago in my life. We spent a lot of time traveling around Canada and traveling, overseas, but I actually didn't get to explore the States. I had been to New York, I'd been to California because I had an uncle there, I'd been to Florida for, Christmas vacation a couple times, but there was so much of the States I'd never been to until I started shooting Top Chef, and we shoot every season in another city.
Right, and you've been all over.
So, and we don't just go, to my point about my daughter, we don't just go for 3 days to every city. We spend a month or 2 months in every city. So since we started Top Chef, we've done seasons in San Francisco, LA, Chicago, Charleston, Miami, New Orleans. I mean, we've done 15 of them, so I can't even remember all the cities. And then where we go for our finales, Mexico, Singapore, Hawaii twice, all of these places that I would have never, ever visited. And we just wrapped our 15th season in Colorado. So we spent time in Denver and Telluride and Aspen and Boulder. And, we got some pretty amazing adventures in there too.
Yeah, just the scenery and then also getting to vicariously enjoy all those different cuisines. Like a New Orleans season is very different from a Seattle season.
I think it's the best thing about Top Chef.
Yeah.
Not just for me personally, because it's the best thing for me personally, that I get to explore these cities. But I think, people ask me all the time, how has a show like Top Chef stayed on the air for so long? It's very rare that a show lasts 15 seasons. Any show, I mean, Seinfeld didn't last 15 seasons, although that's a whole other story, and they're doing just fine. Don't feel bad for them. It's a different genre, obviously, than reality competition. But it's very rare, and I think part of the reason, or part of what sets the show apart from other competition shows, certainly, is that we don't shoot in a studio. We're out on the street, we're in kitchens all over the world. And that, the city that we shoot in, or the country that we shoot in, really is almost like another character, and it really informs the guests we have, the locations we go to, the food we eat, and we do really like deep dives into the history and culture of that place. I've learned so, we spent 2 months in New Orleans in July, by the way, June and July, hot, and Charleston, and getting to know the south of this country, which also for me, coming from Canada, we didn't have a south. Like New York was our south, right? You guys were our south, and your winters are just as cold as ours. Yeah. So that has been an incredible education for me. I didn't learn American history at school, and I've been able to live it a little bit, which has been really exciting.
Yeah, that's great. And then like when the Chicago season, who here was like, hey, they're at my Whole Foods.
Yeah.
Look at that.
We disrupted a lot of Whole Foods in Chicago. I feel like Chicago was the season, first of all, one of my favorite seasons, and obviously hometown girl. speaking of bringing it home, Stephanie Izard won that season, and we're so proud of her. She's just become like a total megastar. But Chicago was the season where I think like social media really became a thing.
Yes.
And all of a sudden we were stalked by paparazzi all season. I mean, Chicago cares about food.
Yeah.
We had no idea when we got here. It was season 4. So we were just sort of gaining speed, and we were stalked by photographers everywhere. We were like stopped in the streets, but I have to say, obviously it's a cliche, but I'm Canadian, so I can talk about how nice people are because we're just as nice. That Chicagoans, am I saying it right?
Yes,
Thank
that
you.
is correct.
Literally just wanted to help everywhere we went. And everywhere we went, people would stop us and give us restaurant recommendations. Like the guy at the checkout at the Whole Foods where I was just like grocery shopping, or where I would go for my morning coffee would be like, hey, you're from Top Chef. Have you been to this? And so I amassed the most amazing restaurant list when I was in Chicago.
Yeah, we have some good restaurants
There
here.
is no question.
We're doing okay.
Yeah.
And we have had some good contestants who have gone on to do amazing things.
Yeah.
Or continuing to do amazing
sure.
things. So when you have written, do you need to get...
No, we have a timer.
We still have our timer, that's right.
I've
Okay.
got one.
Thank God for the
1
timer.
minute and 20 seconds. I mean, just till I have to pull those out of the oven. We can talk as long as you want.
I was looking at your bio and realizing that you have helped to write cookbooks before.
Yes.
With the great Jeffrey Steingarten.
Yes.
Who, must have been interesting to work for.
He's fascinating. It was. I didn't write a cookbook with him though. He writes essays, so there were recipes.
Oh,
but
so
it's
it was
more.
his book.
It was his book. His first book, The Man Who Ate Everything. He's the food critic for Vogue magazine.
Yeah.
And he is one of the most brilliant food writers in America, without question.
Yeah.
He's also a real character, a very complicated man, but a brilliant writer and researcher. And I worked for him for 2 years. I did all his articles for Vogue with him and all of the research for his second book. His first book, The Man Who Ate Everything, is what I read to find out about him to get the job. And then I got the job and we did his second book together, which was called It Must Have Been Something I Ate.
Right. And he's just kind of irascible. And
That is a word for it.
That must have been good training for learning to work in the TV industry.
It was good training for a lot of things.
Yeah.
He sort of believed in negative reinforcement in a lot of ways. Instead of telling your child how well they're doing so that they keep doing that, keep acting with that behavior, if you tell the child everything they're doing wrong, they'll just be scared to do that stuff wrong again. So we kind of worked that way. I'm going to take this out of the oven while we're talking. But I learned about research. I learned so much about food, and he introduced me to the entire world of the culinary world.
Because he knows everything and he ate everything. For those who do not have smell-o-vision at home, we're smelling the almonds.
You get that fragrance?
Yeah.
You don't want to burn them. You want to toast them at 350 gently, just so till they're fragrant. Just because they burn very easily. There's a lot of oil.
Yeah.
In nuts, so
and once they start to burn, it's sad.
Yeah,
don't
bitter,
do that.
and you don't want that. So I'm just going to set these aside to cool a little bit while we do everything else.
And then are we going to do something with the bread?
We are. Are you ready for me to cook, or do you want to keep? We can chat and cook at the same time. Whatever you want.
We're ready to
I'm
cook.
a multitasker.
See, here's another thing about Top Chef, because you're watching at home. You're like, oh man, that looks really stressful and it looks really hard. And then the first time you actually have to cook while you're explaining something to someone, it's really hard.
Yeah. You know what Top Chef really makes me appreciate as a cook is the casting department. Because we get them already chosen, already honed down from 5,000 applicants to 15. But to choose those 15 people is such a complicated matter. It's not just about choosing the 15 best cooks, and it's not about choosing the 15 best personalities. It's about choosing 15 people who can do both at the same time, who are interesting storytellers, because it's television, it's entertainment, right? You're watching it to be entertained, but they're also, executive chefs at the highest level at this point. They're not amateur cooks. They're the real deal, and obviously they've gone on to be major award winners and open restaurant empires.
They're amazing.
So it's really
chefs.
like the fact that they can entertain us and then at the end of 30 minutes present us with the most gorgeous food you've ever seen is sort of like a miracle of nature.
No, they are rare stars.
Yeah.
So you're squeezing your bread.
So this is how it's done, people. You wash your hands first. But I swear to you, this is how my abuelita did it when I lived in Spain. You just squeeze the water out of the bread and put the bread right in. And there's more water than you need. You definitely don't need this. It's not like pasta water where you want to save it because it is all starchy. I mean, it probably is starchy, but but this is all you need. Ooh. So I'm just squeezing out the excess water. And then everything else, I mean, we've toasted our almonds, we've squeezed the water out of the bread, and everything else comes together in about 30 seconds, which is why I love this dish so much, and why it's also perfect for summertime, because literally, after you've toasted the almonds for 10 minutes, you never have to even turn on your stove. And southern Spain, especially where I was living in Sevilla, it's like, I mean, it's more North African almost than it is Spanish, certainly in its temperature. So by April, it's 99 degrees every single day. And April is this, well, they actually start sort of like all of the festivities of the year in March during Semana Santa, which is Easter week, Holy Week. And that's a very somber week for Spaniards, and a very serious week. There's parades in the street. It's glorious and beautiful. But from then on into April, they celebrate. And so the first major celebration in Sevilla after Semana Santa is Feria, which is this extraordinary carnival that's thrown in the city of Seville every year. And you stay in these little tents on these fairgrounds all day, and you listen to flamenco, and you dance, and you eat, and you have gazpacho. And it's 100 degrees, and you can't believe the heat and the dryness in southern Spain at that time of year. And that's why you want cold gazpacho and a lot of sherry. Two good things.
Now, would you drink sherry with the gazpacho?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm using sherry vinegar, so that's
nice.
The next ingredient. I put a little bit of sherry vinegar in here. Sherry vinegar, obviously made from sherry. So delicious. It's a staple in my pantry. I choose it over almost any vinegar all the time. I mean, I love malt vinegar for other reasons because I'm Canadian. And that's the kind of the British in me, the British Empire in me, the colonist, the colonial influence. But also, cherry vinegar is so nuanced and delicious. It makes great salad dressings. It's great in gazpacho, of course. I add a dash of it to soups at the end of making soup because it just brightens everything up. And then these are the roasted, toasted almonds that are chopped up. I just made them and cooled some earlier. This is a paprika, smoked paprika, another classic Spanish spice ingredient. Pimenton, they call it sometimes. And it's smoky and beautiful, and it's going to add a really elegant, delicious note to the food. A little garlic, because you can't have gazpacho without garlic. And then tomatoes, of course. I've seeded the tomatoes, so I've chopped them up and taken out sort of the excess seeds and water. But Jeffrey Steingarten taught me, one thing that Jeffrey Steingarten taught me, of the many things he taught me, was that the inside seeds and all those juices, although we often discard them because they have such high water content, they are really where a lot of the flavor is. So the best thing to do when you're making gazpacho is you chop your tomatoes and you take all the meat and put it into the gazpacho, and then you have this big, juicy pile of tomato seeds. Put them in a bowl, set them aside, and then make another incredibly Spanish and delicious thing, pan con tomate. So just toasted bread, rubbed with a little garlic, and then you just pour that fresh tomato juicy seeds on top, sprinkle with salt and drizzle it with olive oil, and you just eat it with your gazpacho. So now we have a whole meal, and the sherry, and we're done. Okay, and then my last, so the almonds, not traditionally in every Spanish gazpacho, but in that romesco sauce, and then the other ingredient is roasted red peppers. You can roast them yourself and peel them, or you can buy them in the jar already done for you, and that's equally fine. This is a very, very full food processor. I hope it doesn't explode. We're about to see. I have many more stops today, so hope I don't have to change. No, we're good. And there should be enough water in here that this will all get mixed up really easily. I'm just going to get it initially pulsed, and then there's two more ingredients that ultimately make the whole dish come together. I'm just going to do that for a minute, and then salt, very important. I'm using about a teaspoon, but obviously you can salt it a little bit and then taste it and salt it a little more. And often you're gonna chill it in the end so that you drink it cold, and you wanna taste it after you've chilled it too, because that can affect the seasoning. I'm gonna take a minute. This is good for radio, right?
Sounds like a very sexy car.
Yes. Olive oil. I'm gonna drizzle the olive oil right in. And you want to drizzle quite a bit, like a quarter cup. This is coming out sort of slowly, but that will emulsify it and make it creamy and rich and really delicious.
That is such a beautiful color.
Isn't it? That's what real gazpacho looks like in Spain. It's that light orangey, beautiful sort of salmon color, as opposed to just like tomato sauce that we see sometimes gazpacho looking like here. And I think we're good to go. Looks good to me.
Beautiful.
Let's have a taste. The almonds and the red peppers and the tomatoes. I'm gonna give it one more pulse to mix up that last little bit of seasoning. There we go. Then I would put this in a pitcher or any sort of container, put it in the fridge for an hour or two just to make sure it's cold, because the motion of the blade obviously warms everything up a little bit. And you're done. Then the other really fun part about gazpacho is you can have gazpacho just like this, and it's delicious. We made some here, as you can see. But what I also love about gazpacho are the toppings. And I like if I'm having people over and you make this and it's super easy and then everyone's really impressed by how beautiful it is. I'm just gonna give these a little stir, is to put out a little toppings bar and let people top it themselves. And you can top gazpacho really with anything, and it just gives it texture and crunch and a little bit of dimension. So here I have some hard-boiled eggs, some chives, a little bit of jamon, Spanish prosciutto, essentially, and then chopped cucumber. And I love just kind of putting a little bit of each on the top.
It's so pretty.
And it's a great contrast, right?
So, and is that something they also do in Sevilla?
A little bit. I mean, they might not be as elaborate as this. If you're getting gazpacho just sort of like at a tapas bar, it's usually pretty basic. But, we're allowed to embellish, especially when there's jamon involved.
Yeah. Well, and this is also a nice thing to do if you're having like a dinner party.
Yeah.
Because like a dinner parties for dummies, you want to have soup, but you don't want to deal with bowls and spoons and replacing soup spoons. You could do a cold soup like this in cups,
and then you can drink it. Sure. And the great thing about it is it's cold, so and like any good soup, it's even better the next day. Right. So actually, the best thing to do when you're making this is make it the day before, and then your first course of your dinner is done, and you just pull it out and serve it, and you don't even have to worry about timing and cooking, and it's perfect. And I would happily eat it all year round. Some chives. You can use scallions. You can use any other herb. Parsley, of course. Chopped cherry tomatoes. More roasted peppers. I'm just, anything kind of colorful with a little crunch. Have fun with it. And that's it.
Man, that looks pretty.
There you go.
Okay, that deserves a round of applause. It's beautiful.
In case you want to
Oh. I have to get a lot of the jamon.
Yes, definitely. Nice.
Nice flavor.
Sort of nutty and textured.
I'm done now.
And super healthy, by the way. And, I mean, egg aside, but that's easy enough to, egg and jamon aside, it's vegan, right? So healthy and good for you and full of good ingredients.
That is such a beautiful, simple recipe. When you were coming up with this cookbook, and you've written a memoir, so you have, you've written a book before, but when you're approaching a cookbook, how do you come to the, oh yeah, we got to have the Spanish gazpacho and I want to mix it up a little and add the Romesco element of it? What else were you looking at as you were kind of outlining where you were going to go with that?
A couple things. The book idea came first, this idea that I wanted to take all of my experiences from travel and the people I've worked for and the adventures I've had and bring them home to my home kitchen, because when I did have my daughter, I found I'm home more, I'm cooking more. I mean, I came from a culinary background, I went to cooking school, and I cook in my job, but until I had a child, I cooked at home for dinner parties. I cooked on occasion at home, but like a lot of chefs will tell you that their own kitchen goes unused. And then I had a daughter and was home way more, thank goodness. I also lived in New York, so you're out every night. And I believe that the New York architecture world conspires with the restaurant world to make kitchens so small and unusable that you'll go out for dinner every single night. And it was my job to go out for dinner every single night. So when I had a child, two things happened. One, obviously, I started being home much more. And two, we moved to Brooklyn, and I had my first really good-sized functional kitchen that I could design for myself. And so I wanted to be in my kitchen all the time, and I was cooking so much more. And I realized that the recipes that I make at home are all sort of inspired by the places I go and the people I meet along the way and the recipes I encounter. And I'd been keeping pretty good notes. So I had notebooks from all of these trips and adventures. And so I just started going through them and picking out the dishes I liked the most. And then I wanted to base every recipe in something familiar. I didn't want it to be a chefy, fussy recipe that seems so esoteric that no one's actually going to make it. But I did want to offer everyone with every recipe a little twist, something that felt a little bit different, that taught you something, that made you a bit of a better cook, that made you think about an ingredient or a combination of ingredients in a different way. So like the gazpacho, I think when you look through the book and you see every recipe, I don't just make banana bread, I make a banana cardamom upside down cake. And I don't make gazpacho, it's a Romesco-Style Gazpacho. So it's based in tradition, and I think I respect the traditions, but I've always given you something that's just a little bit of a twist.
The photos are so beautiful.
Thank
and
you.
I happened on a whole fish baked in salt.
Yes.
And you referred to, working with Tom Colicchio and how you'd, discovered more about baking that way, which I don't think a lot of home chefs would go to automatically.
Tom is a big fisherman, an excellent fisherman. I've fished with him several times. And there's actually a picture of us fishing in the book in Alaska when we went there, another place I would never have gone until I went to Top Chef. He's a big fisherman and obviously an incredible cook and a great teacher. And he used to talk to me a lot about salt baking fish. Salt baking, covering fish in a big mound of salt, packing it in. It's a salt and egg white mixture, actually, so that it's a little bit wet and it's almost like wet sand, so it seals in the fish. And when you bake it, it creates a crust over the fish that steams the fish, essentially. So you don't need to use any fat at all, anything to coat the fish or any added ingredients except the fish itself. Sometimes I like to say in the book, I stuff it with herbs and fennel and citrus just for fragrance. And I use fennel seeds and citrus in the salt as well, so that sort of adds to the flavor. But it is really the simplest thing to do. And it's such an ancient cooking method. This is not something that's modern at all. People have been baking in salt for probably hundreds of years. You take simple whole fish, or you can do it with a piece of fish, but it's obviously a little easier when the skin is on and the fish is intact. You make this egg white and salt mixture, pack it around the fish. It goes in the oven, it seals, it forms this beautiful crust, so the fish steams, and when you take it out, you crack open that brown golden crust, and the fish is done, and you literally just peel the salt off. And the fish is not salty. Don't think that it is seasoned, but it doesn't get salty. The salt doesn't penetrate through the skin, but it just lightly seasons it so that it's actually usually perfect. And it's almost foolproof, this method of cooking.
I love that kind of
mess it up. And it looks so impressive. Like if you are having a dinner party and you take out of your stove when people arrive, let me get the book, I'll show you the picture.
Yeah.
This golden mountain of salt and crack it open with a giant wooden spoon.
That sounds
I guarantee
pretty
people will be impressed with you, and it'll be delicious every time. And then all you need is a salad and some gazpacho, right? And you're done.
Simple and impressive. Yeah.
Exactly. So
that is my thing.
This is sort of, it's hard to see, but this is the salt crust when it comes out of the oven.
Wow.
And then you just push it. This is it raw. So this is the salt on the base, and I've stuffed the fish. You pack all the salt then on top as well, so it's completely submerged. And then it cracks open like this, and then it's done, and you can just open it and fillet it and take out the meat, and it's really beautiful.
That's so great. It's so nice. Should we have some questions from the audience? We've got a microphone here if people have a question for Gail Simmons. And all you have to do is raise your hand. And I see some people looking shy. I know. It's okay.
I don't eat people.
So there we go. We've got a question over there. Oh.
Hi, Gail.
Hi.
I am an avid Top Chef watcher.
Thank you.
And I love you. You're great.
That's
And
nice.
Tom,
Thanks. I love you too.
And I just wonder, when you guys are debating, and some of you are really, convinced that this person should go or that person, and I'm sorry, I'm not asking about the book.
No, that's fine. This
Sure.
is a valid. It's all
Right.
here. It's all game.
Anyway,
fair
I'm
game.
just wondering how much debate goes on there, because it's sometimes they seem to be in that room getting filmed.
And they're
a long
drunk and
time.
they're
Yes.
making up games
And they're
and taking
arguing with each
forever.
other.
We take a long time. Actually, we've gotten better.
Yeah.
The first probably 6 years of the show, we would debate long into the night for a lot of reasons. There's also a lot of other things that go on during judges' table that, production things. We need to flip the cameras. We need to change the lighting, for different setups. It's a different lighting and camera setup when we're talking to the chefs versus when we're talking to each other, that kind of thing. So there's all the logistics. But truthfully, we used to talk to the chefs, the winners, they'd go away, we'd debate the winner, they'd come back, we'd pick the winner, we would talk to the chefs about the losers, they would go away, we'd debate, we'd bring them out, we'd announce the loser. We narrowed that down a bit, but there used to be times when we would debate for 6 to 8 hours. I know. I think about it now. I mean, I remember, especially finales, three finales that I can remember. Season 3 in Aspen, season 5, we shot the New Orleans finale in New Orleans, and we shot in Puerto Rico for our season 4 finale. So 3, 4, and 5, I remember we would start shooting judges' table at like 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, after we'd had the final meal, and we were there till the sun went up. Once to the point where the roosters started, we were in Puerto Rico, we were outside, the roosters started crowing, which was interfering with the audio, and the sun came up. So all that mood lighting, that nighttime sexy mood lighting while we're having this very serious judges table, totally blown because it was 7 o'clock in the morning and people were going to work and the sun was out. So that was a problem. But we got it done, and we take it very seriously. And the chefs would sometimes get bored to tears, but we wanted to make sure we were making the right decision and that everybody was unanimous and understood the reasons for choosing the person we were choosing. Because ultimately, we sort of changed these people's lives. I mean, in ways that sounds a bit.
No, but there's a lot at stake.
Like
you are helping to make their careers,
Yeah,
and they can win a lot of really, valuable stuff.
That's true. So we took it seriously. We still take it seriously, but we have definitely made the process a little bit quicker. I would say now our average judge table is 3 to 4 hours.
Is there one
significant.
person who puts the hammer down and says this is the way it's going? I mean, is there like a
well, Tom Colicchio is the head judge for a reason. He definitely steers the conversation because that's his job, and he's very good at it. But not real. I mean, there are times when the person he wants to win loses, and vice versa with all of us. I mean, there is an element of food that will always be subjective, and we all think about it different ways. The reason there are 4, if not 5 of us at every judge's table is for that reason, that it's not a fascist dictatorship. It is a democracy. There are 4 equal voices, and the best thing is that one of those voices, 99% of the time, is not permanent. So they're just there for that one episode. They don't know the chefs. They don't have any idea what they cooked last challenge. It has no bearing on their decision. And so that's what keeps it fair, and that also sort of what keeps it arduous and long, and it allows us to make a good decision that we always believe in. Hi.
Hi. I just wonder what fish you would be encasing in salt.
Oh, good question. You can do a lot of fish, actually. Small whole fish are great. So the fish in that picture is a branzino. You can do orata. You can cook a whole side of salmon, or a whole salmon, although they would be large. So those are sort of you can do a lot. You can cook snapper that way for sure, whole snapper. If you go to your fishmonger, and I would just ask for the freshest sort of small whole fish. This recipe specifically is about 3 pounds of fish total, 3 to 4 pounds of fish. So you can do 3 1-pound fishes. Or you can do one larger 3 or 4 pound single fish.
I think we've got one more back here.
What's your favorite recipe in the book?
It's like choosing children.
What's your favorite child?
107 children are in this book, and you're asking me to pick one of them. It's hard to say. They're very personal. That's the difference between writing someone else's book or helping someone else with their book. And now I know. Thank God. You know, it says on the book, I wrote this book with one of my best friends, a woman named Mindy Fox, who has written many cookbooks in her own career, and we've been friends for 20 years, and she helped me be a little bit objective about my recipes. Otherwise, I was just too up in my head about it. What's funny is the recipes, as I wrote them in the table of contents and would have told you would have been my favorite a year ago, aren't necessarily my favorites, and the ones that you didn't think were going to work out or that came to me at the last minute are usually my favorites because they were sort of a spark of inspiration. The dish on the cover is sort of an amazing dish. It's a spaghetti pie. And it sounds gratuitous and ridiculous. Sounds like something that was like made for Instagram, but it is one of the most satisfying dishes. It is like one of my career triumphs was making this pie. It started because as I mentioned, I had traveled through New Zealand when I was 19 with one of my best friends, my college roommate, and when we were in New Zealand, we would stop, you know, we were backpacking and we'd stop at all these like roadside gas station type cafeterias to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, and we had, you know, $10 to our name to spend on food. And every stop in New Zealand had spaghetti sandwiches. They made spaghetti sandwiches. I know, it's crazy, right? And these days, I mean, with this, you know, the carb revolution, no one in their right mind would eat a spaghetti sandwich. But to, you know, college kids who needed to spend $2 or less on lunch, it was perfect, and it filled you right up, and kind of delicious. It was like, almost like a panini, pressed and sealed with spaghetti and tomato sauce in it and cheese. So it was like the ultimate amazing grilled cheese, like
pizza,
everything you need as a 19-year-old or as a 40-year-old, quite frankly.
I'd have one.
And so I wanted to make something inspired by that recipe, but not make spaghetti sandwiches. And so I started playing with like kind of what's fun and something that's great for kids, but that adults love. And I came upon making a spaghetti pie. And the recipe is behemoth. I mean, it serves 12. Or it serves a family of 4 for 5 days. I mean, it weighs 15 pounds. I made it on the Chew 2 days ago, or was that yesterday? I think that was yesterday. I made it on the Chew yesterday, and even Mario Batali was like, wow, I need to make this all the time because it makes the best leftovers ever. I mean, it's like cold pizza. You want it the next day. Even better if you put a fried egg on top of it. But it has sausage, like spicy or fennel or sweet sausage and broccoli, or broccoli rabe and tomatoes and about 3 pounds of cheese. But you're not eating it, again, it serves an army. And you just need a little slice, but every single day for a long time. And so it was, you know, a really fun recipe to make. I love a lot of the desserts too. I'm really proud of them. I'm not a pastry chef, but I'm a dessertaholic. And the dessert chapter is my biggest chapter. And there's a bunch of recipes there that I'm very fond of too.
So I have one more question,
Yeah.
just about your work with Bumble Pie Productions,
Sure.
which works with women in the food industry, and also just about, you know, you're talking about all these different places you've been all over the world, all these different flavors and tastes, and obviously the people behind them. And it always strikes me what a universal subject food is. It's not just about what you're putting in your mouth.
Definitely
it's about
not.
seeing the world and visiting people and finding out about spaghetti pie.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, does that some of what you were thinking about?
Absolutely. Food is, you know, our common denominator. No matter who we are, no matter what our politics may be, no matter who we root for in the World Series. I was here, by the way, last November, and happened to be here the night that the Cubs won the World Series, which was the greatest night of my life.
Really?
And I was also, you know, I'm from Toronto, so when I was a teenager, we won the World Series 2 years in a row, and this, I mean, Chicago, that was an amazing night, just saying. Coincidence that I happened to be here for it, and I was so proud. But truthfully, food brings everyone together. It's how you understand cultures. It is how you understand the natural world. Food affects everything. It affects politics and the environment and relationships and cultural dynamics. And I think it is our greatest strength as a civilized species. And I think that what it can unite people, and it shows love. It's how I express my love to my family. It's how, you know, a warm meal for someone who doesn't know where they're getting their next meal is a pretty powerful thing. And this country, sadly, has a lot of people who don't know where their next meal comes from. And that's not because there isn't enough food in this country. It's because the food isn't being distributed and there just isn't access. So food is a big topic, but it's an important one. And I think that it crosses partisan lines. And so that's also why I love it so much and why I think exploring food from other cultures is so important, because it gives you perspective on the world.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing your gazpacho with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your cookbook.
Thank you, guys.
Bringing It Home, Favorite Recipes from a Life of Adventurous Eating by Gail Simmons is out this week. And here in the Culinary Kitchen, thank you so much.
Cheers. Salud.
Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.